Hey friends, we're back with a brand new episode of the Maxwell Leadership Podcast, and I'm truly excited to have you with us today. We're the podcast truly that is committed to adding value to leaders who will in turn multiply value to others. My name is Mark Cole, and on today's episode, John Maxwell is going to be sharing with us the best advice he has ever received. Now, what you're going to hear in this podcast, and I'll talk a little bit more about it after John's done talking, but you're going to hear John's map of adding value to people, how he challenges us to think of ways to add value to people. And when I heard his lesson today, and I just was listening to this lesson before we got into the studio, and I went, wow. It was that idea that started this podcast over 320 episodes ago. Yeah, we started this podcast. We said, John, we don't need any of your time. We're going to start this podcast, and I'm going to show you how you can add value and look at a new way to add value. So 5+ years ago, we started this journey. And now over 300 episodes, it never gets old when I get to meet you podcast friends around the world. Just last week, I was in Brazil and I met one of the top judges in all of Brazil. He came up to me and he said, Mark Cole, he walked right past John Maxwell. He said, Mark Cole, I had to meet you because I have now heard 300 episodes. This morning on the way to this event, I listened to my 300th episode. And you said X, Y, and Z, and he told me what I said, and he said, it changed my life. And I went, whoa, that's a little bit more value than I anticipated. Just yesterday, I was on the phone with a financial advisor to my family. He helps my mom, and he said, Mark, 2 weeks ago on the podcast, you said X, Y, and Z, and then he used my words against me and his advice to my mom. But here's what I really want to tell you. This podcast is meant to add value to you so you can multiply value to others. So listen to John's lesson. It inspired a podcast that now has had over 40 million downloads. And what is it going to inspire in you? Now, after John's lesson, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to be joined by a co-host. And today, Tracy Morrow, one of my favorite people in the universe, is with me. And we're going to talk about this vital piece of advice. We're going to help you apply it to your life and your leadership. Make sure, if you're new to the podcast or if you're an existing friend, make sure to go to maxwellleadership.com/best thing to download the bonus resource for this episode. And there you can find out how to watch the episode on YouTube. So grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, challenge yourself. We're going to add value to one another. Here is John C. Maxwell.
I want to talk to you about the best advice that I ever received. If I entitled this, I would call it the best thing you can do for yourself and for others, okay? When I graduated from college, my father, who happened to be the president of the first college I graduated from, I sat down with him. I was getting ready to begin my life, my calling. And I asked him for advice, and what he told me was the best advice I ever received, and this is going to be the core of the lesson. He said to me, John, if you want to be successful, 3 things you need to do every day: value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love people. He said, if you'll do those 3 things, you'll always have people follow you. You'll always be a person of influence because it's all about people. And people, most of them don't feel valued. Few of them ever have anyone that really believes in them. And he said, hardly anyone has anyone that unconditionally loves them. And I have taken that advice. Value people, believe in people, unconditionally love people. And in every book I write, I take it through that grid. Every teaching I take, like today, I take it through that grid. I continually remember that in everything I do and everything that I am, I value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love them. What I think about the best thing I could do for myself and the best thing I can do for you is I can value myself and I can value you, because if I can do those 2 things, if I am a person of value and you're a person of value, then my next response is that I'm going to add value to you. So how do I do that? How does that happen? So let me give you just my little 5-step everyday process of adding value to people. Here we go. Number one, I value people, okay? I go back to the golden rule. Treat others as I want to be treated. So every day I make sure that the core of everything I do is based on the fact that I value people. And the reason that's so important, especially for leaders, is leaders see more than others see, and leaders see before others see. And because of that, because I see more than most people, and because I see before other people, this gives me a very distinct advantage over other people. Trust me, in life, if you can see more and you can see before, you're going to win the race. So the question is, what do I do with that advantage? What do I do with the advantage I can see more and I can see before? I can either use it for personal gain, or I can use it for your gain. I can either manipulate you, which means I move you for my advantage, or I can motivate you, which means I move you for your advantage and personal and mutual advantage. So every day I value people. The second thing I do every day is I think of ways to add value to people. When I look at my calendar, I ask myself, who will I see and what can I do? I want to encourage all of you to look at your calendar, what you're doing tomorrow, see who you're going to see, and ask yourself a very simple question. When I'm with them, what can I do that would add value to them? Number three, I not only value people and think of ways to add value to people, but number three, I look for ways to add value to them. In other words, when I'm with you, I'm constantly looking and saying, what can I do right now to add value to this individual? Wow. Because here's what I know. Who I am determines what I see. Just like who you are determines what you see. If I'm a person of value who values people and wants to add value to people, guess what? I'm going to see all kinds of opportunities to add value to you. Why? Because that's who I am. I don't see what's before my eyes. There's a whole bunch of things before my eyes I don't see. I see what I'm prepared to see. And how I view others is how I view myself. Now, this is huge. So how do I do this? How do I look for ways to add value to people? Well, I love to play golf when I'm on a golf course. One of my desires is to find somebody that's working the ground. Maybe somebody's raking the traps, the maintenance people. And I intentionally separate myself from the other golfers for a moment. I go over and introduce myself, and I thank them for their hard work and how beautiful they make the course. And then I give them a financial, I just slip them some money and say, hey, take your family out to eat today. And my name's John, I'm your friend. And I move on. If I'm in a restaurant, especially if it's a single mother or if it's an elderly person, I make sure that I give them a great tip. You want to be conscious and look for ways that you can begin to add value to the people around you. These are people I don't even know. In fact, every day I make it intentional that I give something to somebody that doesn't know me at all. I can't benefit at all from them. Okay, the first question I ask anybody that I do know is, how can I help you? What can I do? So every day I value people. Every day I think of ways to add value to people. Every day I look for ways when I'm with them to add value to people. And number four, every day I do things that add value to them. I not only think and look, but I actually do things. In fact, I ask myself every night, who did I add value to? And how did I add value to them? And I always have a goal, and this is a simple goal, but it's really good. I want to be the first to add value to people. When you're first, you set yourself apart from everyone else. I watch people in the crowd often hesitate, and I often think, if you wait till everybody else does something good before you do something good, it's still good, but you get lost in the crowd. Be the first to help. Be the first to add value. I try, and so I become a person of action. So when I see that there's action needed, while other people are asking themselves, should I do this? I've already made up my mind because I prepared my mind. My mind has already been made up. My mentor, John Wooden, used to say, John, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. So I've already made my mind. So every day I value people, think of ways to add value to people, look for ways to add value to people, do things to add value to people. And finally, number five, every day I encourage others to add value to people. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm encouraging you to now begin to follow this process because it's the best thing you can do for yourself, but it's also the best thing that you can do for others. I encourage you to be a person of significance, not just a person of success. Now, success is wonderful, it's important, but success is pretty much about me. It's very personal. It's how well I do in life and how well I provide for my family and my home and it's all about me. Significance is all about others, and I want to encourage you to become a person of significance. I've known a lot of successful people that were not happy, but I've never met a person that does significance, that literally pours their life into others, that they're all fulfilled. They're all having a sense of inner deep satisfaction because they know it's not about them. Once you have tasted significance, success will never satisfy you. Trust me. I hope this lesson's helped you. It's the best thing you can do for yourself, and it's the best thing you can do for others. And my name's John, and I'm your friend.
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified Team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
Hey, welcome back. I talked about two of my podcast friends that I met just in the last weeks in my preamble to John's lesson today. And just during the lesson, I was thinking again of more of you, women and men, that you give us comments each and every week. We'll wrap up today's podcast with comments. And I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you. Take a moment and let us know how we're doing on your podcast player of choice. Give us a comment. Please give us a question. I would love to have more questions from our podcast friends. Or just tell us something that we can do to improve it and make it more value add to you. By the way, if your podcast player gives ranks or stars, give us a rank. Let us know how we're doing and how we're hitting the ball for you, because we are here to add value to you. And Tracy, I was thinking while John was teaching today of all the lessons, and we're at 320 plus lessons, of all the episodes, if you ask me which one I think John Maxwell lives out the most, it would probably be this one.
Yes,
Just
agreed.
a few weeks ago, we were traveling to Colombia, to the country of Colombia. We had been invited down there with the president, and our pilot, Jerry Anderson, he's an equipped board member. He's just a gift straight from God to John and I, and helps us get from point A to point B so often. But before he kind of came into our world, he was launching roundtables in the country of Colombia and doing such an incredible job. And I'll never forget, this was 2 weeks ago. John gets on the plane and says, "Mark, I thought of something epic to do when we get to Colombia." He said, "I'm going to go and I'm going to get Jerry Anderson a Mont Blanc pen in Colombia to tell him how thankful I am for what he did in Colombia, because I now stand on his shoulders." Guys, I was like, oh my goodness. Well, Jerry comes back mid-flight and John says, "Jerry, I got to tell you what I'm going to do." He can't hold anything when he gets
Of
something like
course.
that. He's got to tell it. He said, "Jerry, when we get there, I get Mark Cole a Mont Blanc everywhere we go. It's kind of our thing." And he helps me create this collection that's unbelievable. He said, "We're not going to go get Mark one today. We're going to go get you one. Because what you did for years in Colombia, in the correction facilities and in the school systems," he said, "I want to memorialize that impact." Tracy, I watched a 74-year young man weep and said, "I have never had something more thoughtful given to me." This is a very, very successful business guy. Here's the point. What John did that day is exactly what he's telling us in this lesson. Who will I see and what can I do? Who will I see and what can I do? And I've watched him do that over and over and over again. And so I'm very excited about this lesson. It was this lesson, as I said earlier, that sparked the podcast. What can we do? Who will we see? Our podcast listeners. What can I do? Add value to you today. And so, Tracy, I'm super excited to have you with me.
I love that. I love that story that you kicked us off with that. And I love that for Jerry. That's so special. And I love for people to hear the little behind the scenes stories of John just being John. Because that was one of the biggest treats for me. You know, how many times do you want to meet somebody who you really look up to, either by their teachings or their writings, and you meet them in person and it's kind of a disappointment. We're all human. But when you find that they don't practice what they teach. And that is one of the most wonderful things about John. He is absolutely human. So we are not talking about him as if he is anything other than a human being, but he is wonderful in the fact that he really does practice what he teaches. And absolutely this lesson, you know, we use this as really the pillars of the relationship lane for John. These pillars are really what it is to be a relational person, a relational leader. And so I'm thrilled to get into it. And I love that John assesses and has assessed what has been his best advice he's ever received. Think of all the people in the world John has met and had an audience with and private conversations with. And I love that his best advice he ever received came from his dad. And so the first thing before we get to questions, I just want to encourage our listeners, if you've never done this before, to take some time after you listen to this podcast to assess what has been the best advice you have ever received and why. You know, to have a dinner with John or time with John, he will ask, this is one of the questions that he asks around the dinner table. And this would be a question for you to ask around the dinner table, because what it does is you get the best advice everybody around the dinner table has ever received, which means you get that advice as well. So, but let's talk about, Mark, just right off the bat, the fact that of John's education and all of the audiences that he's had with all of the people that I just kind of described, world leaders for generations that he has met with. Talk about the power of John attributing his best advice being not the knowledge that he has, not how to make more money, not how to write a lot of books, but how to interact with other people. Can you just spend a little bit of time about talking about that's what he considers the greatest advice he's ever received?
Yeah, and so I've heard him tell that story dozens of times. I've watched him live it out hundreds of times. And it feels so simple. And then yet I watch how layered he is to make sure that he does that. And this session, from my standpoint, for those of you that are new podcast listeners, I don't gush every podcast about John Maxwell. I could. I've never been impacted by someone at such a level that he has. But this one could be the gushing session for John Maxwell, because he truly is so intentional on this, but yet he tells the stories, which I love, of how he learned how to be this intentional because he wasn't already. He tells the stories of missing an opportunity with somebody that he wishes he would have shared the importance of his faith with. He tells the story of allowing somebody in one of his first leadership assignments that bought the meal every single week, and he didn't realize that he was getting in deficit each time that he let that happen. He talks about all these moments that he failed to be able to learn to be so intentional. So I promise you, I could fill this episode with things that blow me away of how John Maxwell adds value. Just yesterday, I'm on a plane with him, and it's his oldest granddaughter's birthday. And I'm just going to leave it there, because if we have time, I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. But I leave you a cliffhanger because I could do that every single day. I watch such a level of intentionality in John Tracy that he says there's times that he was never this good. And perhaps so. 24 years ago, really 21 years ago when I started getting real intimate access to John, close proximity access to John. Man, it has been a nonstop journey of waking up and say, who will I see? What can I do? Who is going to be in my environment today? And what is a way I can add value to them? And I do believe that comes with a level of intentionality to learn from moments that you don't do that, so that you can have more moments that you naturally do that. For all of us, I can tell you a story of how I added value to our leadership team just today, because 10 days ago, I realized that I did not add value to the room, and I had to go correct it. But I'll tell you this, I don't think I'll do that same mistake the next time, because I'm learning from it. And what my hope and desire for you today is that we give you a story, or John gives you a point that helps you understand the power of how you can do things for others around you.
Yeah, this is a great lesson. This is like who John Maxwell is. And without making him sound, again, like you say, we aren't trying to deify him or in any way. We're just trying to say, like, this is his strength. This is why he's so loved for so many decades. And so let's do a deep dive study of what makes him so lovable in such a genuine way. So before we get to them, the pillars, what I call the pillars, he talks so often for so long, decades, in fact, about seeing more and before. You got to see more and before. So could you just, before we dive into this lesson, could you just share with our listeners, how does someone look for more and before? What does that really mean to see more and before?
Yeah, I think, number one, if you're a leader on a team and other people are seeing things before you and other people are seeing bigger opportunities than you, you might be the leader in position. You are not the leader. Leaders see more and before. They see before everybody else sees and has to enlighten people, and they see more than other people see. They see opportunities. They see potential obstacles that others don't see. That is one of the distinct identifiers in leadership. And so just first and foremost, I'll tell you that you're going to have to start looking. So in this idea of seeing more and before in valuing people, I told John the other day, I said, John, I don't know that I can ever get to a place that I can think of ways to add value to people like you do. That I can look for ways to add value to people like you do. And he said, oh yeah, you can. Because it takes work. It takes practice. It takes discipline to wake up every day and do that. And I went, he just demystified this whole thing for me.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to get to these 5 pillars. John really does see more and before, but that was not a natural born ability. That was a developed discipline in the area of adding value to people. So don't despair, those of you that are not, gifts is not your love language. That's okay. You can still get better at seeing more and before in ways to add value to people. And that's the biggest encouragement that I can give you. You do not have to do this naturally, but you do have to do it consistently to get more and before.
Yeah. And I think the root has to be from a place of self-confidence. He starts with valuing people, but he snuck it in just almost, if you might have missed it, if you weren't really listening. But he said, I value myself first. And of course I value others. And he rode right into it. And I want to go like, put on the screech, put on the brakes. He values himself.
Yep.
And I think so many people dive right in and try to value people, but they almost to the point of, you have to first stop and say, do you have value for yourself? Because not everybody does. And if you jump into valuing other people, you will do it at the detriment of yourself. You'll devalue yourself as you're trying to value others. And you'll get far enough down the road and in these points, in these, what I call pillars of relationship, of John's best advice, that you'll get to a place where you will either have self-loathing or you have put yourself so far to the bottom of your list that you'll realize, like, I'm starting to not value others because I'm starting to resent others. And so really, it's really important. The very first precursor to valuing people is you really do need to value yourself.
Well,
let me John is great at that.
Yeah. And let me come off of that just a moment, Tracy, and give you a real illustration of a teammate that I'm working with right now. Brilliant teammate of mine on our leadership team, and just has this unbelievable, uncanny ability to lift people. They're just so bright, so amazing. They edify and lift and encourage people. Some time ago, as I began to work with this leader on a certain 2 or 3 items, actually, I realized how negative they were to themselves. And I went, whoa, I didn't see that. I've never heard negative about anybody. And now all of a sudden I'm digging into you with this, and there's this negative perspective. And I went, what is that? The more I uncovered, the more I went there, the more I realized that was a common opinion or self-assessment of this individual. And I said, let me tell you this. If you don't change the value with which you see in yourself and the value that you give to yourself, it's going to start coming out toward others, even though you've never been known for that, of devaluing people.
It's so true.
This leader then said, well, do you want to know what I really think about that person? Do you really want to know what I think about that person? I said, I do. And they began to tell me of challenges they had with that person, and they don't know how to get over it. And so the positivity was a farce or a pose because they didn't want to change their perspective. And I went, I can tell you why you're having this. Because you have not learned how to see the value in yourself first. So when you see the flaws that are in all of us, in that person, you begin to impose in them what you see in yourself. And I said, that's
right.
why you're doing that. And they went, oh my goodness. And I can tell you, even right now, just after about a month of working with this individual at that level of depth, they've already began to self-talk and now talk about themselves in a much greater way. So Tracy, I 100% agree with you. You cannot value others if you don't value yourself. That's not a selfish statement. That's not a self-absorbed statement. That's not an egotistical statement, not a narcissist statement. It is a statement that says you will not be able to sustain valuing others if you don't first value yourself.
Because John says all the time, we see people not as they are, we see them as we are. And so if we are ignoring how we view ourselves, we're going to see them through the filter of how we view ourselves. And it's going to eventually get caught up with us, like the example that you just gave. So that's amazing. So number 1, I value people. And John says so often, and he touches on it a little bit in this lesson, but he really does a deep dive in it when he teaches this in depth. He'll say, if you don't love your people, if you don't care for the people that you're leading, you will be tempted to manipulate them. And that is for your own benefit. Because once you make the connection, like the person you were just talking about, if you make a connection with a person and it's under a false faking it to kind of make it, and you're trying to fake that love for them, then they will develop a love for you back, believing that you care for them, which inside you're like, you should see all the problems I have with you, even though I'm smiling to your face. Then you can begin to manipulate their love and loyalty to you. So talk a little bit about that difference between the leaders that you've seen. I know you've seen them in the time that you've been leading a team, leading organizations, but leading team leaders. You're a leader of leaders. Talk about the difference. I know you've seen it between a leader who uses that advantage for personal gain. And that advantage is having the loyalty and love of your team because they feel the love and value from you. Using that for personal gain versus using it for the gain of the team or the individual.
So it's such an apropos question. Today, I taught several hundred of our certified team members around the world, and I'm teaching them on high road leadership. John's newest book, by the way, I happen to have it right here. For those of you that are podcast viewers, I'm holding up the book, High Road Leadership, that John wrote this year. It's just released this year. I was teaching out of chapter 4, which is do the right things for the right reasons, which is motive. And John in that chapter, Tracy, I know you've read it. John in that chapter, he parallels the difference between motivation and manipulation. And he talks about how motivation is to inspire others for what's best for them. Manipulation is to inspire others in what's best for me. And it's a great chapter. In fact, now that Tracy's brought this up, you're going to want to go reread this or go buy it and read it. Because what John really says is there's a thin line. A lot of times people say, well, what's their motive? If their motive is not pure, then they're going to manipulate people. No, I've seen people with a pure motive that's manipulated people. In fact, I've seen somebody the last time I looked in a mirror that did that just 2 weeks ago. In other words, me. I was in a leadership meeting and I was trying to get them to understand the vision that I had. And one of the questions kind of got me sidetracked to think they don't even know what the vision is. And so I began to try to use my style of leadership, which is very passionate, to convince them to understand my agenda, my perspective, rather than slowing down and understanding where that leader was coming from in their off-based remark. Their remark was off-based, but it wasn't an indication of vision separation. It was a misunderstanding of how to apply the vision. But I began to categorize it as a misappropriation of vision in the lead team. And I spent 40 minutes using the coal hammer, boom, 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 driving home the vision, only for have somebody come up after me and say, you know, that was just a misunderstanding, not a vision leak or a vision disconnect. And Tracy, what I did in that moment showed how someone with a good motive, I feel like that I have one good motive, someone with a good motive could misuse my style of leadership, which is very much emotional, and my passion became intensity, and I undermined the impact of that leader and that leadership team for the moment until I caught it. I was using manipulation in a meeting to get my agenda across to them. And that's why John is saying, man, we have got to, even as leaders with great motives, we've got to think of ways, look for ways, actually do things that add value to people on a daily basis.
And I think that what you just described is something for those of you who have taken the Strength Finders test can relate to this. If you really slow down your pace to think, if you in any way identify with having winning others over, that is a strength that can be used as a weakness. You know, there's always an underbelly of every strength that if you use it incorrectly, or if you just use it without thinking, being intentional with even the gifts and strengths that you have, you can manipulate people without meaning to, just to get to the end result rather than really serving and seeing the people that you serve. And I love that you always use those examples, Mark, that hopefully this portion of the podcast is for using our personal examples of putting into play what you have personally seen up close with John, but also as you've put it into play in leading Maxwell Leadership. Okay, so you gave a great example, Mark, at the beginning of what John did with Jerry and the Mont Blanc pen. And for those of you who have never heard of a Mont Blanc pen, I had never heard of a Mont Blanc pen when I first met, try and say that pen name 3 times fast, when I first met John. And since then, I hear about it all the time. I now see it, that's kind of the action attraction, the rule of action attraction. But now I hear about it all the time. And what that is a great example of he thought ahead of time of what he was going to do to bless Jerry. And then he looked for the Mont Blanc store of what he was going to do. And then he actually followed through and he did it. And so are there times in your schedule where you think each day, spend time thinking of the people you're going to meet that day and how ways that you might bless them, and then look for those ways? Do you have like a 1-2 punch of thinking and looking for ways each day according to your calendar, or sometimes it's out in advance because you might need to order something or like a gift or something? It doesn't always have to be something with money. Oftentimes it doesn't have to do, adding value doesn't have to do with something to do with finances. It could just be serving somebody or showing up for them with your time. How does that look like in your life and how it plays out?
Well, again, let me say this, and you can come back and dig into anything that you want to, Tracy, but I'm going to illustrate think, look, and do all right here in something. But let me say this. So you ask for me, yes, but let's again keep in mind, I am a novice in an expert world of adding value to people. I'm a novice at this. And I tell you, I feel that every time I watch John do the Jerry thing or what I'm getting ready to describe to you. It is not for me to understand and even illustrate this lesson as much as it is John. So I do every morning. I look at the people that I'm meeting and I think, okay, who am I meeting and where can I add a unique surprise wow of value in today's agenda? And I do that every morning. I wake up and that's one of my disciplines every morning. What is the key thing I need to accomplish today in all of my meetings? What is the one thing I want to go to bed tonight going, I nailed that? And then the other question that I ask is, where can I add surprise, wow, value today? But John, and this is all wrapping up the think, look, and do piece. John thought of a way many years ago to wow his grandchildren. And Tracy, you and I were talking about parallel tracks of grandparenting right now. John decided several years ago, many years ago, a way that he could do something very unique for his grandchildren is every birthday write them a poem from Papa's pen. And so he writes this poem out. It's now by text, by the way. And so he thought of a way that would be very unique. The reason I say this is because I gave you a cliffhanger just a moment ago about this story. We were on a plane just yesterday. We were on a plane coming home, and John went, "Oh, I've got to add value to Madeline, who's turning 24 today, and this is the year she's getting married. She's getting married in a few months." And he says, "I need to weave that into the poem today." So what he did, he's already thought of a way to add value, but he's looking for a unique way to make this one a little bit different than all the others. And so he brought in her significant other that she's committed marriage to. And it was an incredible poem that all included how this was a new season. And while it's a new year, it's not just a new year, it's a new season, and it's rhyming. And it sounds like Dr. Seuss is sitting on the plane right beside me, because we are just rhyming our way to this incredible memory. And let me tell you where do comes in. We had been on 12 hours worth of flying. We had been all around the world. The craziness of our schedule was insane. And he went, "Whoa, slow everything down. I've got to do this today because I don't want her waking up without my poem, because she hadn't woke up without a poem in many, many years." See, when you think of ways and you look for ways, which is thinking, I did that years ago, and I thought of a way that I can make myself very special to my grandkids on their birthday. I look for ways to take it to the next level, because this is marriage here. And then I don't care where I am in the world. I don't care what I've just done. I don't care how tired I am. I'm going to do it before I lose it. And it's just a brilliant place to where John has thought of it, pre-thought of it. He looks for ways to make it very special. He does it no matter what the demands are on his schedule right then. He
is so good. And I love the fact that he does this for his grandkids. And again, I watch him and hear about this. And the first thing I want to do is I'll sit and take notes to myself to remember the kind of Grammy I want to be. I have 3 grandkids. 1 is on the way. And to me, I'm always looking for ways that I can create something. You know, you and I, we touch a lot of people. We love people. We're involved with people on a much smaller scale with John. But I always want to have something really special for my kids, for my kids' significant others, and for my grandkids. And so I love that John does that.
And so let me say this. We're out of time, but let me say this. That's the 5th point. John's story encourages others to add value to people. So let me tell you this right here. I don't know what tradition or what situation your grandkids are getting ready to have from you, Tracy, but after this podcast, I'll tell you this right here. John Maxwell accomplished number 5 in his life.
It's better. It's going to be better.
He encouraged you to think of a new way and an even greater way to value your grandkids. It's the same thing with me. I mentioned a moment ago about high road leadership, and I mentioned chapter 4. I really would encourage you to pick that book up. But let me tell you this, speaking of adding value to you, our team wants to add value to you. We have a high road leadership assessment that helps you determine what kind of leader you are. And so I want to give that to you for free. We're going to link that in the show notes. You're going to be able to buy the book in the show notes and be able to get that, because again, we exist to add value to leaders who multiply value to others. We have a listener comment that I wanted to share with you today, which was from Callista. And Callista said, "Thank you so much. This is really an educative podcast." And I'm just going to tell you this, Tracy, it never gets old meeting our podcast friends. It never gets old getting to hear comments like this. And it never gets old challenging people to bring powerful, positive change to the world around them, because everyone deserves to be led well.
Are you ready to elevate your leadership to new heights? Join the movement towards High Road Leadership with John C. Maxwell's latest book. In High Road Leadership, John explores the power of valuing all people, doing the right things for the right reasons, and placing others above personal agendas. Learn how to inspire positive change and bring people together in a world that divides. Order now and receive exclusive bonuses, including a keynote on High Road Leadership by John Maxwell himself and a sneak peek into 3 impactful chapters. Take the first step towards becoming a High Road leader. Visit highroadleadershipbook.com to order your copy today.